They made far more money, the Colombians, in a far shorter time than the mafia ever dreamed.
The Federal Reserve Bank in Miami generated a surplus of $5 billion, more money than all of the other Federal Reserve combined.
Cocaine deaths in Dade County have now jumped to about 2 a week.
Shotguns, Uzi, handguns.
It was the beginning of a war.
Cela Blanco was the godmother of the cocaine trade. One mean lady. She likes us to cut people up in little pieces, put them in a small box with a little bow on top. She said, that's the way I do my things.
You have 5 people killed here, 3 people killed here. Mass murder.
Miami was the most dangerous place on earth.
They called them the Cocaine Cowboys.
They called them the Cocaine Cowboys.
Cocaine Cowboys.
This is why Miami is for you.
Okay, well, thanks for taking my call, Billy. We are here with Billy Corben, and Billy is the director of Cocaine Cowboys, one of the most transcendent and most amazing documentaries ever made. I guess you're sick of talking about it, though, right, Billy? It's been it's been a bunch of years. I think the reason I want to talk to you because I love Cocaine Cowboys so much. I think halfway through you forget you're watching a documentary and you kind of feel you're watching a movie. And I think a lot of your work, including Dogfight, your new film from last year about the kind of the street fighting culture within Miami-Dade County. 10 minutes in, you start following people like Tree and, oh God, what is his name? I forgot. Chauncey Tree, Kimbo and stuff. Yeah, you're my favorite documentary filmmaker, dude. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, Cocaine Cowboys is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. So it's been a little while, but, you know, you said something very funny at the top about, like, I'm probably sick of talking about it. And the truth of the matter is that I you know, people will say to me, like, hey, Bill, I know you're probably sick of hearing this. And I'm like, are you going to say that you love our work? Because if you're going to say you love our work, why would I ever get sick of hearing that? You know, why would I ever get sick of talking about, you know, something that we spent a lot. I mean, Cocaine Cowboys was a real labor of love for us, especially at the start. You know, we didn't have a lot of money and we were editing it in my apartment, and it took a lot of time. And so it's been real, very rewarding that anybody saw it and that anybody liked it, and let alone the kind of the influence that and impact that it seems to have had is really. I mean, it's really incredible.
Yeah, well, it has. I think for me and a bunch of my friends, I heard about it from a Colombian chef at a restaurant I worked in 2009. So I knew nothing about this. He's like, "Hey, Ethan, you got to check out this documentary. It's about the." He kept going, the godmother. Anyone not seen the documentary, of course, it talks about Griselda Blanco, which is the godmother who was like one of the toughest, I guess, drug barons ever, really. And baronesses rather, and of course, being a woman, she was, I guess, more dangerous, more cunning, and more, I guess, is evil the right word to describe her? But
well, I think evil's a matter of perspective. I mean, she came from a very different culture and a very different world and a very different time than the one that you and I have and enjoy now, because she grew up in an era of La Violencia, so a vicious, brutal civil war in Colombia that was, you know, that they saw things as children that we fortunately probably did not see growing up. And
thanks
so
for our white male privilege.
Yeah, it creates a, you know, you don't get to choose your parents in this world. You know, it's very very nice to be born, you know, white in America or perhaps white in the UK. The same way, you know. So Griselda Blanco certainly did not grow up with the same opportunities that we did and at the same world and time and countries that we did. And so she kind of played the hand she was dealt. That's not to excuse her behavior, but there are certain cultures where, you know, you go after the American dream, for lack of a better term, by any means necessary. And those are the kinds of stories that we tell at our company, Rack and Tour. It's kind of like twisted take on the American dream. That seems to be the running theme. And you said something also very interesting earlier about how Cocaine Cowboys, we didn't go into it thinking of it as a documentary. We're going to make a documentary. We thought of it as a gangster movie. Like that, just in terms of style and approach. And I think that worked in so much that the audience appears to have received it the same way.
It does. It kind of bleeds into this kind of weird, like I said, even with Dogfight, you kind of get so involved really quickly into both of them. And you've got a sequel to Cocaine Cowboys, we'll get to that. But of course, Dogfight feels like perhaps it's because of the knock-on economic downturn. I guess, of the life in Dade County and stuff. It feels like a natural success to that. But of course, it weirdly kind of bleeds this line between reality and fiction. Even though it's all reality, it feels like you're watching this drama, if you will. I was going, oh God, Tree's got to win this one, and then he loses the fight and stuff. You get really involved. Like you said, going into that, were you consciously trying to make a movie, or was it a happy accident, or is that the kind of style that you've kind of like come up with? Because I've not seen many documentaries that kind of do that. They don't kind of blur that line between you know, reality and fiction, even though it's all, like I said, reality. It feels like you're watching some awesome like action movie. It's like the push it to the limit section from Scarface, but that like 2-minute bit is like the Cocaine Cowboys documentary. It's amazing.
Well, that was the take. Like I said, we went in looking at it as a genre picture, looking at it as a gangster movie, just in terms of how we were going to approach it aesthetically, you know. And I had a, you know, kind of a style book or a mandate for everyone from our DP on all the way to the composers and sound mixers and editors, and it was, you know, the movie was going to, first thing we did, which at the time, you know, we were shooting interviews, I guess, in, what did we start, like 04, 05?
Yeah.
You know, we were doing with them with multiple cameras, more cameras than we needed, minimum 2, as many as 4. One of the cameras was always on a dolly, always in motion, which became very commonplace after that. I'm not claiming that we were the first to do it, but certainly after Cocaine Cowboys, everybody was doing. You couldn't see a traditional television interview show that didn't involve a jib or a crane or a dolly. That became the industry standard after Cocaine Cowboys, and so. But I wanted there to be constant motion, constant cutting. We were going to fade to white instead of black. You know, there's going to be a lot of pastels. There's going to be a lot of, obviously, the color scheme is going to be very bright, obviously very Miami Vice-esque, Miami in the 80s. I wanted the score to not be orchestral or
well, it's Jan Hammer, isn't it? He, of course, did Miami Vice and stuff. Great composer from the 80s, and he really captures that kind of... I've got the soundtrack, but it really does capture that kind of, like, feeling. So, yeah, it's... Sorry, carry on, I'm interrupting you.
No, you just want that 80s synth-drenched kind of sound. You know, I always say that Jan Hammer writes the best driving at night in Miami with the top down music ever.
Yeah.
You know, you could close your eyes and listen to it. It just really transports you. And so that was the mandate. And I'll tell you, Cocaine Cowboys, I think the average feature film has approximately 1,500 cuts. Cocaine Cowboys has closer to 5,000. And the idea was to kind of create the effect almost that you were going on a bender in Miami in the 80s. And anybody who goes like, my God, I feel like I'm on cocaine watching this movie, that's kind of the idea. You know?
Yeah, because I guess you were a child actor, weren't you? Do you think being a performer as a child or growing up as an actor, did that kind of bleed into your work as well, keeping it kind of like feeling like you're watching performance sometimes, even when you're not? When Rivi, of course, the hitman, is telling his stories, it draws you in, but just the way it's shot and the way he's telling the story, the way you cut it, you feel like you're kind of watching... well, there's that thing, The Hitman, isn't it, with... oh, God, Michael, the guy that played Zod in Superman. The Iceman, The Iceman.
Oh, the Iceman Chronicles, with that doc. Those docs on HBO. Yeah.
It felt very much like that.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, perhaps it gave me a bit of a flair for the dramatic, you know, growing up on set or growing up kind of acting, which is just sort of, you know, a make-believe on a very large scale, you know, doing it in film and television. But there's something kind of wonderful, especially in this kind of post-reality show world that we live in, where people... you know, now more than ever consider themselves a brand or a commodity. They consider the value of their story, and so, you know, when you work in documentaries these days, it has gotten progressively more like working in film.
Yeah,
you know,
cinematic.
And also the way that kind of your subjects kind of consider themselves. You know, they kind of understand that they're the star of the show. You know, and especially in something like Cocaine Cowboys, where they're very willing, despite the fact that it is, of course, you know, 20, 30 years later, these stories are, you know, well into their past, you're still asking these people to discuss some very embarrassing, difficult times in their lives. And in the case of Rivi, Jorge Ayala, the hitman you referenced, talking about the murder of women and children. in some cases. And so when you do that, they sort of understand that there's a value in the story that they want to tell, and with that comes an interesting kind of collection of egos and attitudes. This is kind of a little bit of the behind the scenes, if you will. You don't necessarily get that all on screen, but I think sometimes you do. I think the self-mythologizing, you get a little bit in Dogfight. You certainly get it in Cocaine Cowboys too. You know, how much of this is true? How much of this is you know, the kind of the manipulation of autobiography.
Yeah, embellishment.
The manipulation of, you know, maybe even just time and misremembering or alternatively remembering things. I enjoy that, and I enjoy when, you know, when someone in the, you know, in the audience will go like, that guy, is he full of shit? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? Because the audience is in part the jury. You know, you guys, you know, truth is in the eye of the beholder, and we kind of present it. We vet it as best we can. We try not to include bold-faced lies when we can identify them or can't effectively corroborate them. But then it's up to you to say, like, you know what, I think that guy's full of shit, but I like this guy. And that's part of the fun, I think, of watching, not spoon-feeding the audience.
Rivi was interesting because I think, well, he was a mechanic with his father. He came from Colombia in 1969. He worked with his father and stuff. He was like a good kid with a good background. He even says that in the interview. And if for some reason he kind of like, at some point in his life, chose to go down this dark path, leading to, I guess, prison and being this like terrible, terrible hitman. If there is, is there a good hitman? I have no idea.
Well, he was very good at what he did, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about Rivi is that he actually says that he was a bad boy from the very beginning. But which kind of goes to sort of the argument that some people are just kind of born, you know, born bad because.
Well, he went from small-time crook to murderer essentially for hire.
Oh yeah, but he went, you know. He was saying that he was acknowledging that he had every opportunity in life, that his father had a good job. He was never wanting for anything. He got a nice car on his 16th birthday. He wasn't one of these people that kind of get, like in the case of Griselda Blanco.
Yeah, Griselda.
Who turns into criminality as a result of debilitating poverty and the fact that she was growing up in a lifestyle and in a country where it was not uncommon to get into that line of work. Rudy, on the other hand, came to America at 11 years old. And again, his dad worked for General Motors, so he wasn't wanting for anything, but he just had this kind of, you know, something about his character, his personality. He gravitated towards gangs, he gravitated towards danger, he gravitated originally towards auto theft. He was stealing cars is what he was doing, and then you start to run in criminal circles. And eventually you find yourself involved in, you know, with people who are going to escalate, let's say, the level of your criminality and your crimes. And eventually he found himself, as you said, a gun for hire. Yeah.
Well, Coke money, I guess, built the city you now live in, right? Well, the state even, well, some parts of it, Miami especially. What's it like now? Is there still a stranglehold of, like, drug dealers on Miami and stuff?
Oh, there's no drugs in Miami anymore. We cleaned that all up. No, it still has its fair share of problems, as evidenced most recently by the Panama Papers. You know, Miami, Florida in general has always been a sunny place for shady people.
Yeah.
Miami in particular has always been, you know, America's Riviera or Casablanca, you know, and there's something about the transient population, the lack of institutional memory, the fact that tourism and real estate are our number one trades. In fact, there's a theory called the Ponzi state theory espoused by a professor, an economics professor at the University of South Florida, who says that because we have no indigenous industry in Florida, we don't manufacture anything, as Carl Hyacin says, other than oranges and handguns. That's all we produce. That all we exist on is selling the sunshine, selling the Florida dream of attracting new people to come here. And actually, since the mid-1950s, with the advent of DDT to combat mosquitoes and central air conditioning, we could live in Florida, particularly South Florida, year-round. We had, on average, 1,000 new arrivals to the state of Florida every day. That's 365,000 new people coming to the state of Florida. Well, what the hell are they going to do? We don't have any industry, so they become real estate developers. They get into construction, hospitality, restaurants, hotels, all these things to perpetuate the sunshine and the Florida dream. And eventually, in 2007, when we experienced our first population, you know, net decrease, the economy collapsed because it's a Ponzi scheme. Florida economy is a Ponzi scheme. We subsist from hustle to hustle, and as a result, you know, drug money laundering and via these luxury condominiums which no Americans can afford. Certainly Floridians or Miamians can afford in downtown Miami and Brickell. Yet there's like this explosion, and you got multi-billion-dollar sales every year in cash coming via wire transfer. No one is tracing them. Nobody's reporting them. So what percentage of those are illicit money from Eastern Europe, from the Russian mob? Most of it's coming from South America. And what we've known for the last 10 years during sort of the economic recovery.
Yeah.
The Panama Papers finally showed in black and white, which is that Miami, Florida is still ground zero for money laundering, dirty money.
Is the CIA involved in any way? Because in the sequel to Cocaine Cowboys, which we're going to come to now, you continue Griselda Blanco's story, which I understand you're not that much of a fan of, right? You don't like Cocaine Cowboys 2 that much, right?
Well, Cocaine Cowboys 2 was an interesting experiment. It's a little less ambitious than the first documentary, which you just...
I really like it though, because I think the great thing about because the first one builds so much. When you get to Griselda Blanco, you're in so deep and hooked that you want to know more about her, and that was the only thing. When the show ended, you're like, oh. But then 2 came out. I love 2. I really do.
Cocaine Cowboys. Thank you. Cocaine Cowboys 1 has a very bold thesis that the narco dollars, generated by this illicit trade in the late 70s into the 1980s found its way into infrastructure and the foundation of the community and helped build the modern skyline and drive the economy. And then it was a mosaic where we had all of these different interview subjects who were telling you, a drug trafficker, a smuggler, a wholesaler, a hitman, lawyers, journalists, all.
Yeah, you swing between both sides of the fence to kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a mosaic. They're all individual tiles, and when you zoom out at the end and the smoke clears from the cocaine wars, you have the city of Miami, the skyline, if you will. Cocaine Cowboys 2 is a little less ambitious. It's one man's story, which makes it, I think, very tight and very efficient. So it's very kind of cinematic, and the through line's very specific, whereas Cocaine Cowboys is much more of an ensemble. So, you have to really kind of follow it along from beginning to end. But it was done, Cocaine Cowboys 2, Hustlin' with the Godmother is the full name, was done because of exactly what you said, which was a profound interest on the part of the audience and the fan base for the first documentary.
Yeah.
In knowing more about Griselda Blanco, La Madrina, the Godmother. So that's why we did it.
Yeah. It was the chef I mentioned that mentioned it to me. I understand this film broke before it really broke. Wasn't it kind of out and on the internet for people to see before it was released? Is that correct? So it kind of became a thing and famous before you'd even released it, in a sense, right?
Yeah, it was a very hip-hop kind of an arc for Cocaine Cowboys, in that it was bootlegged quite extensively prior to its release. This was in the summer of 2006. It was coming out in October theatrically in the U.S. in 2006, and then DVD the following year in 2007. And in those days, it wasn't, people weren't downloading like that, but it was physical media. So you were getting DVD-Rs, that you would buy at flea markets or in the parking lot of Walmarts with the bootleg guy wandering around with his big book, or in the bathroom at strip clubs. The bathroom attendant would sometimes be selling, in addition to mints and soaps and perfumes and colognes and gum, he would also have a bootleg collection of movies. And Cocaine Cowboys became the hottest selling bootleg on the streets of Miami, and then all the way up the eastern seaboard of the United States, and then across to the West Coast.
That would have been good for sales for Raconteur, sadly, wouldn't it? You didn't see a dime of that.
No, not a dime of it. In fact, if we had thought about it, we should have bootlegged it ourselves. But and some people suspect that we did, but unfortunately we didn't. It would have been a terribly good marketing idea, though it was not the least bit lucrative, obviously. All the tens of thousands of DVD-Rs. It's a funny story. So Mark Cuban, who the very famous multi-billionaire, I don't know if you have Shark Tank over the pond there, but Mark also owns an American basketball team, professional team called the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah.
And so in about 2006 or 7, he's on the team plane flying to or from a game, and he's going from the back of the plane to the front, and he's looking at all of his basketball players. And in those days, they had, the portable DVD players, instead of watching an iPad, or they actually put the physical disc into the individual player. So all these guys had their personal DVD players, and he starts looking, and he sees they're all basically watching the same movie, and it looks really familiar. And he leans over to one of the players. He says, "Is that Cocaine Cowboys?" And he says, "Oh yeah, boss. We love this movie." And Mark Cuban says, "Oh, well, that's one of our movies. We're distributing that at my company, Magnolia." And he goes, Sorry, boss, I got the bootleg. That's one of Mark's go-to stories about Cocaine Cowboys.
So what's your way in as a director for something like Cocaine Cowboys or Dogfight? What is the way in for a documentary filmmaker? How do you collate all these pieces of information and gather people together in order to kind of put this together as a thing for people? How long does it take from like door to door to make a documentary?
Dogfight was, I mean, we shot Dogfight for over 1.5 years, nearly 2 years. Cocaine Cowboys was a similar kind of a period. I mean, we worked, I think, for about 2 years on Cocaine Cowboys. Dogfight took a lot longer to edit and ultimately secure distribution for, in no small part because we had shot, obviously, thousands upon thousands of hours of footage. It was a follow doc, a verite piece, which you had to do a little bit more shaping with. With Cocaine Cowboys, we had an outline going in, although there was a lot in terms of the access we were able to get. There was a lot of surprises along the way and curveballs that forced us to reconsider certain things. The first cut of Cocaine Cowboys was 4 hours long.
Whoa.
And I remember calling my producing partner Alfred Spellman after David Sipkin, my other producing partner, and I sat there editing this movie for months and months and months on end. I was so excited. I called him up and on a landline. I don't know if you remember those. And I went, great news. We have our first rough cut. And he says, how long is it? And I said, it's 4 hours. And he goes, fuck you, keep cutting. And then there's a click and a dial tone. He hung up on me. And we went back to work. And for a while, we thought that maybe the movie Cocaine Cowboys would be 2 separate documentaries with like kind of a cut in half, that we would do a feature documentary on the money and the business, the business and logistics of smuggling, and then the economics of cocaine, and then bring that right into the fact that, when you have a consignment business for a product more valuable than gold, as cocaine was at the time, you have to self-enforce that trade. Because if you give someone 4 kilos and they now owe you $50,000 a kilo, and you say, how much time do you need to pay me back? 2 weeks. Okay, I'll see you in 2 weeks. If they don't have the money in 2 weeks, you don't file a lawsuit against them. In court, you have to. So then part 2 was going to be about the violence that really exploded on the streets of Miami, and how how they killed the golden goose, as Mickey Monday would say. But and the American authorities ultimately had to put the kibosh on the entire trade because of the violence.
Is there not something that could still be done by combining Cocaine Cowboys, the 4-hour version, plus Cocaine Cowboys 2, and make a kind of Netflix miniseries out of it, like a documentary series where you kind of put the bits together? Because you've got a reloaded version, haven't you? Now, what's all that about?
Yeah, Reloaded was really just the opportunity to go back and, because, like I said, we were kind of thinking about Cocaine Cowboys as 2 separate, or a 2-parter. And what's funny about that is that what you just suggested is what I wanted to do, basically. But in those days, going back to like 05, 06, 07, there was no market for documentary or nonfiction miniseries. Now everybody wants one. Everybody wants the Jinx or Making a Murderer. Or everybody wants a
10-part series based. Well, each one's a documentary.
Everybody. Nobody wanted that back then. I wanted to create that market back then, and we could have if we were a little bit more.
Well, you kind of did, because I mean, Cocaine Cowboys like drew people in that don't watch documentaries. I mean, I heard about it from someone who wasn't kind of a documentary person, so it did kind of break through in that way. But is there still not a possibility of kind of doing it again and using all that footage to make maybe a 5-part mix of both the Cocaine Cowboys,
Well, that's kind of what Reloaded was. It was just a wholesale re-edit of the first movie from scratch without any regard for the running time or, it's another thing for the fan. I mean, I was hearing from people from all over the world who had seen the movie 20, 30, up to 80 times, the original Cocaine Cowboys. So I was kind of like, well, why don't we, and we put a glut of deleted scenes on the original DVD, because that's my favorite, personally, that's my favorite bonus feature on any physical media. I still buy Blu-rays. I'm the one. But so I love deleted scenes. That's my favorite thing, because especially as a filmmaker and a storyteller, I like to see what did or didn't make the cut and why it didn't, if it was a good cut, a bad cut. I'm just intrigued by that. So we did put like 30 minutes or so of maybe more of deleted scenes, but then there was so much more. So we just wanted to be able to find a way to get all of that material out to the people who like the movie, and it's been a big hit on Showtime, even at a 2.5+ hour running time. Cocaine Cowboys Reloaded.
What do you think of Narcos, the Netflix series that came out earlier this year? I
haven't seen it yet.
Okay, well, I've seen it. It's absolutely fantastic, but it's about Escobar. But if anyone has seen your documentary, you know that Escobar wasn't the big cheese. He was one of them, but he kind of answered to... hang on.
Killers.
Yes. He was like the old man. He was the real kind of... the Emperor, the Godfather, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, if you will.
Yeah, he and Carlos Slater, though, were really the front men for the operation. You know, the Ochoas, for a very long time, denied having anything to do with the cocaine trade, saying that they were just Pasofino, horse breeders and racers, and so they didn't want to kind of be known for that. But the Ochoa family were the Corleones, if you will, of the Medellin cartel, and then they had the guys who were kind of out in front, like Carlos Slater and Pablo Escobar were.
Yeah. Now I think you should maybe at least check it out, because I think
I will,
because your work, like I said, blends this fine line that you think you're watching a movie sometimes. Couldn't you do a 10-part drama series now of Cocaine Cowboys that talks about Fabio Ochoa and the Godmother and the interaction, and maybe the bleed in, obviously, to Los Angeles as well?
Yeah, I would love to. In fact, we're working on it. It's not a mini-series. It's an ongoing dramatic series. And it focuses a little bit, it's less on Colombia and more on Miami, and how the Colombian influx into, what was a very white southern town at the time kind of transformed, filled with rednecks like Mickey Monday, the pilot from Cocaine Cowboys. People who pronounce it Miami is how they say it. You still see some of those Florida
with
crackers
your southern accent
around, and so we'd love to do that. I think it's a real Game of Thrones-esque kind of story in America.
It is, yeah, it really is. I mean, now I've seen Narcos, that's all I could think of. Is like, there's a better story here. I'm sure there is, of the Godmother and stuff, and like you said, all the stuff coming into Miami, and maybe even, I guess, the CIA connection to LA, like filtering it in. Because I've heard this. Did you hear that thing recently that Nixon? There's a recording. That the drug war was just a front, basically, to kind of like repress ethnic minorities and the anti-war movement. So there's all this like giant, almost like governmental conspiracy part attached to it.
Well, that was very well known, at least since the 90s when the recordings first were released, and of course all of the original laws against hemp and cannabis and marijuana all stemmed out
the decorticator, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was
all
the
racial motives.
Yeah.
It was first so hemp couldn't compete with the
decorticator, that machine that could
and then of course they wanted to be able to find a reason to lock up black people for any reason in the world, and a plant that grows out of the ground that's safer than poison ivy seemed to be the best way to just repress an entire minority group of people for no legitimate reason.
Have you heard of Michael C. Ruppert, the LA cop whistleblower? They tried to draft him in by the CIA. They tried to draft this guy, Michael C. Ruppert, into this corporation, basically, to kind of like help move drugs into LA and like into the inner cities, into Watts, into East, basically, all the kind of black areas. And he blew the whistle on them, and he kind of corners the head of the CIA at the chief... what's his name? John Deutsch. He used to run the CIA in the mid-'80s, and he confronts him basically in this kind of like black community center, and this guy like freaks out basically. If you've not seen it, I'll send it to you. But yeah, they were trying to like induct him basically into this, I guess, subgroup within the LAPD that was, I guess, getting more corrupt. And then he said no, blew the whistle. They tried to kill him. It's a really interesting story. I'm going to send you the stuff. It's quite remarkable. Anyway, moving on to Dogfight. Is that not a series waiting to happen as well? I was hooked on that thing. Like 20 minutes in, you've got like Kimbo and stuff, and Dada 5000, and this is like, it's almost like an East LA Rocky story, but obviously in kind of Miami. Do you not think?
Yeah, well, that was another one of those projects because we had shot and acquired so much material that we had talked about.
And for anyone listening, just explain to them what Dogfight is, Billy.
Sure, Dogfight. Well, first we should spell it.
Dog. I keep saying dog, but when I say it, it sounds weird in a dog. It sounds like dog fight. Dog fight?
No, I actually,
in a British accent. It doesn't work.
Almost phonetically spelled for a British accent of dog.
Dog
fight.
Dog.
Fight.
Hello, Governor.
Yeah. So Dogfight, DAWG, Dogfight is about this subculture of backyard bare-knuckle brawls, these illegal, unsanctioned...
It's almost Victorian, isn't it? Like old Victorian Queensberry rules bare-knuckle boxing, but...
Well, I guess it's almost like Knuckle. I don't know if you saw the documentary Knuckle.
Is that the gypsy boxers?
Yeah, the Irish families that kind of do these. It's almost like that, but in urban America. And what's interesting about this neighborhood is, when people think about Miami, I think you say Miami to anybody in the world, they think of the 15 blocks of South Beach on Ocean Drive in Miami.
The Manhattan area, if you will.
Yeah, you just think immediately, oh, I know Miami, South Beach, Miami Beach. But Miami-Dade is a giant county with 34 different municipalities. And, the Miami of today, the Florida of today is the America of tomorrow. So Miami has a third worldian economy. The income gap is extraordinary. It's literally approaching third worldian levels, which is going to eventually happen in the entirety of the
Was
United
it that
States.
bad in the 80s when the drugs were obviously even more in flux than they are now?
It's always been bad, but it's getting worse.
Right.
It's getting worse in Miami. It'll get worse in Florida, and then it'll get worse in the entirety of the United States because we're really the bellwether. We're the canary in the coal mine down here. If you want to know what challenges or calamities will befall America in the decades to come, you need only look at South Florida. And so a neighborhood like in southwest Miami called West Perrine, it has a disproportionate number of minorities, a significant number of whom are living, at or below the poverty level, much higher unemployment than the national average. And you have a lot of people who are also felons, people who have been locked up and gone to prison at least once or multiple times, at which point many of their rights are deprived of them even after they get out of prison and have essentially paid their debt to society or been rehabilitated. They don't have the right to vote. It becomes very difficult to get a job because now they're convicted felons, and they very often return back to crime. And so this fellow, Dada 5000, Fear Harris, who was a protege of Kimbo Slice, who became very famous doing these backyard bare-knuckle videos on YouTube. He was a very early viral star, actually, in the world of internet video or YouTube video. And so he invented or at least pioneered this business model of young men with very little other opportunity to essentially do these backyard fights, video record it, upload it to the internet, and try to get discovered by a professional MMA trainer or promoter and go pro. And in the 2 years just under that we were shooting this, we saw at least 4 or 5, 6 guys go pro directly from the backyard, and 2 guys that didn't live that long.
Yeah, that was Tree and Chauncey, right?
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Well, one was essentially murdered. Chauncey was shot, and
Yes.
Tree was killed by the police. Is there a well? I mean, we see these terrible videos all the time on the internet now, constantly. My Facebook feed is filled with like police brutality and.
Well, thanks to the Guardian. I mean, they're really the paper that started to treat America almost like a third world country and say, like, if the U.S. press is not going to cover this, which Washington Post finally did, it was incumbent upon somebody in the world media to do it, and it was the Guardian that actually, to their credit, said, what is going on with the police in America, and started to actually do some legitimate investigative journalism, and most importantly, start to gather the data. The police in America were not ever required, and still are not required, to supply the data on their use of force, and even when as they say, a citizen or civilian dies in custody, which means essentially they were
beaten to
killed
death
by the police.
Yeah.
Either intentionally or otherwise, and they have no obligation to gather those stats and report that data to the federal authorities, who can at least have some idea about where there may or may not be problems or civil rights violations. It took the UK press to actually prompt anyone to do anything about it.
The neighborhood police where these like backyard brawls happen, though, do they kind of? I mean, I think the documentary, they're kind of turning a blind eye to it in a sense. Is that still the case now, 2 years down the line?
Well, what's interesting about the documentary is when push came to shove, we kind of documented what became the end of the backyard fighting era. These events were being held at least about once a month or so in this neighborhood, and really the more popular that it became and the more publicity they received, that really effectively ended what was, once an underground movement goes overground, you kind of have to legitimize it, because then you're so popular and well known that you don't have the, you can't really exist in the underground, anymore. So that's essentially what happens. They don't really have them like that anymore. Dada 5000, the Don King of the backyards, who is promoting these events in his mom's backyard, weighed in the fighters on his mom's broken bathroom scale and everything. He's now started a legitimate legal fight league that he's trying to bring bare knuckle boxing to the fore and get it legitimized.
Have they not started? Have they not started professional schools to learn to fight as well? Because I mean, sometimes you get someone who's kind of like quite proficient versus someone who isn't. And as you see in the documentary, some guys kind of just get pummeled in there, and there's no medical, there's no kind of like support in that sense.
There's a gaggle of these guys who were trained as boxers or in wrestling or MMA, but the vast majority of them are just street brawlers. You know, they're guys who fought in school, fought on the street, fought in prison. They're not really trained, skilled fighters. But don't get me wrong, I would never get in the ring with any of these guys. I mean, there's some tough motherfuckers. But to answer your question about the police, I think the police did the right thing. I will defend them and what you saw in the documentary, the Miami-Dade Police Department down in the Southwest and Brine area. Essentially, what they were doing and you'll hear it from cops off the record all the time from down in that area. If they were driving on the streets of Perrine on a Saturday and shit was quiet, there were no corner drug deals going on, no guys with guns wandering around. You didn't hear the sound of gunfire. They knew that Dada was holding an event in the backyard because, the community would go there and everything. Honestly, with the exception of the one scuffle that you actually see towards the end of Dogfight that happened at the gate over some nonsense, I never saw any violence in the backyard or any other than in that ring, that 12 by 12 ring where consenting adults chose to duke it out. So I think the cops did the right thing, because can you imagine if the police went in the backyard of someone's private property where they can't see what's going on because there's a tarp up? They can say they know what's going on, but nobody called 911. Nobody was complaining.
Sure.
If they just decided to storm into this backyard and push everybody out on the street, could you imagine the escalation? Could you imagine the violence that might have occurred then as a result? I mean, so I think the police really, listen, there's a rule book, but then you got to do what we call community policing sometimes. You got to measure the temperature of the community, understand the people, talk to the people, know what's going on, and know how best to handle a situation like that, and I think they handled it really beautifully.
What was your reason for doing Dogfight in the first place? What was your what message did you want to send, or why were you attracted to the subject matter in the first place?
Well, there's a couple things. First, I think it was the idea of showing. I mean, the very beginning of the movie, we kind of show this is not South Beach. This is 20 plus miles southwest of what everybody in the world thinks of when they think of Miami. So people understood that there is this other part of the world here. So when you say Miami, I think you should think of West Perrine as much as you think of Miami Beach. When you watch football games, American football games from the Miami Dolphins Stadium in Miami Gardens, Carroll City area, which for a while was one of the most dangerous areas of Miami-Dade, still is among them. You'll see a blimp view of the stadium. Okay, and then they cut right to South Beach, to Ocean Drive, as if the ocean is 3 feet away from the stadium. The stadium is 18 miles away. So even like there's just this misconception about that Miami is just remember the Will Smith song? Everybody's got $100,000 cars and everybody. I mean, that's just not anybody with a $100,000 car probably rented it. Okay, in Miami Beach. Let me just say that for the record, for the most part. But so I feel like Miami is just such a diverse place that people don't really understand that. I think there's been a few, fictional shows, maybe, like Burn Notice and, less so CSI Miami, but places that try to say, like, let's film in, like, unique sort of, pockets and corners of Miami.
Is it mostly a black community? I mean, how safe were you there as a white filmmaker or a white guy just wandering around? When you first went in there to pitch, I guess, this idea to the residents, how safe were you just wandering in there? Were you okay? I guess their track record with white cops isn't that good, so I mean...
It's just 4 words. I directed Cocaine Cowboys. That's it. That's my ghetto pass.
That's your free pass.
That's my street cred right there. Sometimes I'd wear a Cocaine Cowboys shirt, but honestly, I didn't know it until I really started to spend more time in the hood that like, you're Billy Corben? I was like, I know you thought I'd be taller, right? That's usually what everybody says, taller and older usually. But I'm getting older, but not taller. Growing older, but not up. But I guess I didn't really. I always knew the influence of Cocaine Cowboys in the hip hop community because like you started to. They would name check the movie and the characters in hip hop lyrics. That's always our goal with a movie, is to get it name checked in hip hop.
Is that how you got the song for the sequel, the rap song? Is that because?
Yeah, we were just there in Oakland, and this guy, this Snoop-looking guy who was chilling around there, incredible. He's like, I'm a rapper. I'm like, okay, everybody's a rapper, you know, like. And he like leaves and comes back the next day, and he had recorded the song overnight, like in 8 hours. Or he did the beat, he did the lyrics, and it was pretty funny. It was pretty fun. I thought the beat was really catchy, and I said, "Congratulations, you've just written the theme song." And and I thought that soundtrack obviously was a little more conducive for the style. You know, that was much more Grand Theft Auto San Andreas.
Yeah.
You know, whereas Cocaine Cowboys 1 was Grand Theft Auto Vice City, obviously, you know. So that was the style, the color scheme, the Michael Mann is kind of blue and you know, in sepia tones, and then the hip hop soundtrack and everything. It just felt right for that sequel.
Have you approached Michael Mann at all to kind of work with, to kind of like bring this these Miami stories, if you will, to bear? I'd
love to fix Miami Vice. I'd love to reboot Miami Vice and do that right and do that modern.
Who'd be Crockett and Tubbs?
It's a good question.
You're right, actually. He redid Miami Vice, didn't he, in 2006, and it kind of was it was really flat and boring for some reason. And he changed the soundtrack from like a really cool like 80s electronic soundtrack, like a Jan Hammer or a Harold Faltermeyer type thing. It was really kind of not great. It was like Collateral 2, not Miami Vice, the film, wasn't it?
Yes, I think Collateral 2 is a very good way of describing it. It was very much in that sort of like in
DV
that
cam.
It was that one note kind of moody piece, but not quite as moody as like you'd hoped it would be in the Miami Vice moody way. You have to remember that Michael Mann never directed any episodes of Miami Vice that I'm aware of over 5 seasons. So, you know, that's what Miami Vice might have been like had he, you know, not been shepherding it as an EP, but actually been directing it. And the first thing that they forgot, you know, and I've talked about this with a lot of people, you know, the first thing that he neglected is really any humor at all. And Miami Vice was as serious as it got.
And there's an alligator on was it Crockett's ship? Yeah.
Yeah, Elvis the alligator, the former mascot for the University of Florida, where Crockett was a quarterback. You know, that was, you know, it always sort of had a lightness to it. You remember, you know, I mean, whether it was you know, Tubbs with his singing or his accents, or it was and listen, when he announced the casting, I was like, that's great casting, because Jamie Foxx can do accents. He has a sense of humor, obviously. You know, he's originally like sort of a comedian.
Yeah,
in
he's a stand-up.
Right, so I thought this is great. This is going to be great, you know. And Colin Farrell can do serious, but he can also lighten it up a bit. And then he gave them nothing to do. This is how I look at it, though. Is it like if you could take a script from the Miami Vice series, and you could take a black Sharpie, and you could black out the names of the characters, and you would be able to recognize the voices of the characters in the dialogue, in the writing. If you black out the names of the characters in the Miami Vice, you know, a feature film adaptation, they all speak in the same voice. They all just speak kind of Michael Mann-ese. You know, they don't have their own unique original voices like they did in the series. And I think that took a little bit of the fun out of the experience. Not to mention, if you've seen the director's cut, it's a little bit better. It opens with a boat race. Inspired by an episode of Miami Vice, and it opens at this boat race, which is like cover for a drug smuggling operation, which is right out of one of the episodes of the series. And it's such a Miami Vice-y, even the score by John Murphy is like much more Miami Vice-y with the electric tar going. And when I saw the director's cut on Blu-ray or whatever, I was like, oh, that's how the movie should have started. You know, like, you know, and so I think there was certainly some lost opportunities there.
Yeah, for
that
sure.
I'd like to have those opportunities back. I'd like to try to do Miami Vice, you know, as it would be today.
Well, I think you could. I mean, is that are you suggesting maybe there's an iron in the fire there, or is that what you is that on the horizon? What's the next for Raconteur and Billy Corben?
Well, Miami Vice is a dream project for rebooting that series in Miami of today, but in a sort of, you know, obviously fictionalized Miami of today. That's my dream project. I'm putting it out there in the universe right now so that maybe it'll kind of come
cross
back.
Everything.
Yeah, maybe it'll just getting it out there, starting to.
Do you think would the tone of your version of Miami Vice be more kind of like Grand Theft Auto, or would it be more serious, like the documentary style, or how would you do it?
I think I would do it with Miami a bit like Chris Nolan's Gotham City. It's this kind of broken, not as dark, but just the city itself is this very broken, dangerously corrupt place, and the last good cops are Crockett and Tubbs, and their sort of immediate group, of compatriots and the sort of the sergeant, the lieutenant of their division, and they're sort of like the last good cops in Miami trying to save this decaying city and their souls in the process. Not quite as kind of pathos driven as like The Dark Knight, for example, but have that kind of gravitas while still taking place in what is obviously a very fun city. That's why they call it Miami. Everybody wants to be here, So it's like I would kind of celebrate Miami while these guys try to fix it, and at the same time, Miami is really a symbol of America in general, and whether we're talking about the Cocaine Cowboys series, which to me is the Browning of America. It's the Hispanification of America that we're dealing with now, that Donald Trump is railing about now. Miami went through that. That's old hat for us. We did that, in the 80s, and so like that's what sort of Cocaine Cowboys would be an allegory for modern America in late 70s, early 80s America. And I think Miami Vice would be an allegory for the America of today as well, and what we can do in Miami to kind of fix the rest of the country.
Yeah, no, I do. I really think there's a market for that. And I mean, Narcos that's coming out now, everyone went crazy for that. And it's a fantastic series. So, I mean, check that out and then plot your own path. Because I really think Cocaine Cowboys 1 and 2 could be a great 10-part series. You could, have all these different elements in it.
Well, we are actually doing a Cocaine Cowboys Los Muchachos, which is a 6-hour documentary.
Doing a third one?
We are our fourth one.
Billy Corben, we love you. This is great news.
If you Google Sal Magluta and Willie Falcone, they were the largest Cuban cocaine traffickers in the history of the world. They operated in Miami in a similar time, but they went all the way to the 90s. And we're doing that story in 6 1-hours. It's a family story. It's a very Cuban kind of a family story. So it's
Is this for Netflix or someone?
I can't say yet, but
Okay.
We'll make an announcement soon as to where you'll be able to see it. But won't be until 2017 because it is a 6-hour documentary miniseries, and it's a new story with new characters, if you will, and a new arc. And I think there are certainly elements of it that are unquestionably better than Cocaine Cowboys 1.
Well, if whoever buys it demands a sequel series, do you have enough material to just carry on? Like, because Making a Murderer is 10 episodes, isn't it? And I think The Jinx was 10 episodes. That's usually the kind of remit they order, isn't it?
Jinx was 6, but it was also kind of erratic in its run. I think the last episode was like a half hour, as I recall. So this is going to be basically 6 1-hours, and if we can get the kind of distribution we're looking to get, we can be a little free-formed with the length. Meaning some of them might be 45 minutes, others might be 62 minutes. We could just get everything we need to get into one of those episodes. So
that sounds great. That really does sound great.
We're excited about it. We've been working on it for a lot of years.
Yeah, and that's great. That's amazing. Los Muchachos, right? But it's not called Cocaine Cowboys 3. It's called Cocaine Cowboys Los Muchachos.
Yeah, because it's not really the first 3 movies, whether it's Cocaine Cowboys 2, and Reloaded, are really all the same. They're all part of this. They involve the same sets of subjects, and this is all new. And so we wanted to obviously continue the brand because it's very much a Cocaine Cowboys story, but not give it a number so that people would think it's a continuation or another kind of spin-off of those other subjects.
Well, you mentioned it earlier. It's literally like the modern day Game of Thrones. You can get multiple like drama series out of this as well. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And it's very territorial. It's very tribal. Whether it's the the redneck Americans or the rich waspy Americans, the Colombians, the Cubans, they hated each other. The Colombians and the Cubans. So and the Colombians fighting within themselves, Colombian organizations fighting other Colombian cocaine organizations, and all of that converging and exploding on the streets of Miami at a time when our police officers had 6-shooters, had like old school, Western kind of pistols. And the next thing you know, here's these guys on the backs of motorcycles machine gunning people in broad daylight, high noon at the busiest shopping mall in the county. That's a very sort of exciting mix that I think is it's basically a different story from the one that Narcos is telling. That's all. It's just different.
Well, that's why it's good, because everyone jumps on Escobar as like, he was like the main cheese, and he wasn't.
But he was the face of that, or him and Carlos later, as I said, those were the guys that everybody knew then and that everybody remembers now.
Yeah.
The Ochoas always wanted to stay on the down low. They not that they weren't violent in their own right, but they were kind of
real power isn't seen, is it? Everyone else kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. The lovely allegory there. Billy, when we wrap up, where can people find your work? Where can they find Cocaine Cowboys? Where can they find Dogfight? Where can they find The You, Raw Deal, all your documentaries? Where can they see these things?
Well, you can start by going to CocaineCowboys.com. You can certainly go to Netflix. We're not all, but a lot of our work, certainly the most popular of it, is streaming all over the world on Netflix.
I think, Cocaine Cowboys 1 is here in the UK on Netflix for sure, because I think I saw it in the feed like 2 weeks ago. Should be on. And Raconteur, can you buy things direct if you want to buy anything sell through there? Is that just an advertisement for your work, or to contact you guys?
If you go to CocaineCowboys.com, I think it redirects you to Raconteur, RAKONTUR.com. It's a little easier to spell CocaineCowboys.com, so I usually just say that. But yeah, Raconteur.com has the full rundown of the work, Raw Deal, A Question of Consent, our piece, our first documentary that went to Sundance in 2001. That's available there. A very controversial piece that never got the out of Sundance, even despite the fact that it was very popular and made the front page of the New York
Post. I was going to say, is there not a chance to kind of bring that back? Because in the news recently, there's all this kind of like withdrawing consent after the fact. If a girl's kind of done something when she's drunk, some people say she's not responsible. Some people say if you drive a car and you're drunk and you crash it, you are responsible. If both people are drunk, why is the guy guilty and the girl's not? So it's I guess a pertinent subject. It still is.
Well, subject matter wise, it's a perennial. There's always at least once a year an incredibly high profile case involving celebrity athletes, universities, something, and it's one of those things where everybody always says, "Oh, I wish we had a video so we'd know what really happened." This was a case where there was an alleged rape at a fraternity house with a video, and people still don't know what happened, even when they see it. And so because of its content, only Channel 4 in the UK had the guts to air it with some minor edits and certainly some digital smudging of some of the more obscene sorts of elements of the videotape, which is essentially a home porn film that may or may not depict the sexual assault of a woman. But we never got very broad distribution in the United States because we're very prudish. Very, very prudish country here. But the UK, they had the balls to actually put it on television and instigate a conversation about this many years ago. And I think you're right. I think there might be an opportunity. I'd love to see it on Netflix so that people can watch this movie and start having the conversation that we're having right now.
Or failing that, not just re-releasing it, but there's another drama series in there as well. There's another great 6-part drama or another 6-part series.
Dude, you should be my agent.
Well, I'll tell you a true Hollywood story. The reason I started this podcast, is it 7 months ago? It was last November. My agent, I'm not going to say his name, but he got fired one day. Well, he didn't get fired. He went missing for 2 months. So his sub-agent took over, who didn't know what was going on. Apparently, he was on holiday, working himself out, whatever he was doing. And as it transpired, he never came back to work. He was hooked on crack. He then went to another agency and got fired from there, and then got fired from a third agency. The sub-agent took over with another woman, and they had no idea what was going on. They couldn't do their jobs as agents. Not their fault. They just weren't experienced. And they basically closed the agency down and streamlined their books, i.e. firing all their clients, me being one of them. So even in boring old UK, we get agents hooked on crack. You couldn't write this shit more. It's ridiculous.
I think all agents are hooked on crack or something.
I think my agent was like Don Simpson, like the British version of him. He was like peeing on hookers in toilets and doing coke, and his heart exploded. Who knows? But yeah, Billy, really fantastic work. So it's great to talk to you. I've been following your work since the start. The only thing I've not seen is the You, but I'm going to go and check that out now. As I said, anyone listening, find this man's documentaries. I'll put links to all his work on the webpage, of course. It's transcendent. It really is. It blurs the lines between fantasy and reality. It feels like a movie, but it's a documentary. Why you're not making big movies and big Netflix series now, I have no idea. But it sounds like you're making a step in the right direction. I do hope we see Billy Corben's Miami Vice. I really want to see that. Billy, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Ethan. Anytime. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming on. I hope we can do this again sometime. Whatever the next thing is, you want to talk about the 6-part series, Las Muchachos. I'd love to talk to you about it.
And in the fall, we have a 6-part series about actually a man born in the UK, John McAfee.
Yeah.
Of the McAfee antivirus, and more recently and famously, a person of interest in a murder in Belize. We're doing 6 hours on him, very Jinx-esque. Coming.
Well, I've seen him on Joe Rogan. He's quite a character, isn't he? There's lots of controversy swirling around him and his young wife, and the way he lives is kind of like a excessive and crazy life. But
and he just ran for president of the United States. He failed to get the nomination of the Libertarian Party this past weekend, but that didn't stop him.
And Trump did? What's going on? The media circus political process?
It's difficult to know which candidate is the craziest in this year's American presidential elections.
You've got Voldemort or Emperor Palpatine. Who's going to be your president?
I'll probably see you sooner than I think. Over the pond.
Well, yeah, do come and see us, Billy. Thank you again. Great. I'd love to do this again. Your work's amazing. I love you. The UK loves you. Hopefully, we can get your stuff. Well, let's see this series, Cocaine Cowboys. The series. I want to see it, dude. God bless you. Thanks, brother. See you later.
It's gonna be pain. It's gonna be anguish, and these guys they fighting for something much, much greater than words can explain. They fighting for a chance at a better livelihood. No rules, no gloves, backyard, bare knuckles. We're in Dade County, P. Ryan.
You could come outside and bullets be flying all over your head.
Dada 5000, he the Don King of the backyard.
Half of the fighters are convicts.
So for those who don't have a resume, but they have a rap sheet, this is who we do this for. Come out, get a little blood on you, knock out a two.
I'm here, I'm trying to make some money and be champion, you know?
Everybody got dreams of taking their talent to South Beach.
I'm poor, you know, don't have very much, and I really want to make it.
Don't give up! Don't give up! Fight your fight, nigga! Fight your fight! You got a family. You got kids. You got bills.
I got 50 on Chauncey. Ain't nobody betting. To come out 5 minutes, one day, and make $300-400.
That person in front of you, that's not a person. That's an object standing between you and your dope.
No matter how many times you fall short, you get back up. No matter how many losses you take, you keep moving. If they love you in the ring, they're gonna worship you outside the ring. We got to run it.
You gonna cheat my eye?
So you done?
You gonna cheat my eye?
I seen so much shit, I'm expecting somebody to get killed.
Well, I'm just trying to find out about brain activity. Am I doing this just to feed a body that's living in the brain that's not?
Street fighting, the state is cracking down on it now. You kill somebody, you'll be sitting in jail for 25 years.
At the end of the day, Dada don't have nothing. And he never walked away with $100 for himself. I told him, look, you either fight or let it go.
You have to learn to be relaxed. Everything is not the fucking street. I know that because I came from the same place you came from.
The fear, Dada!
I think the dog in the fight is the fighting the dog.